How's it going, everybody? Handsome Dan here with episode 2 of the Grand Tournament. If you haven't checked out the first episode, make sure you go check it out here first if you want to watch it in order or don't want any spoilers for the results of the tournament. For a quick reminder on how the format works, each player in this tournament is bringing 4 different decks to the table. Every time a deck wins the game, it gets retired and can't be used anymore, and its players are going to have to select a new deck for the next game. Decks are chosen fresh with each new round, so players are selecting their decks in each game in order of most wins to least wins. We'll go ahead and look at the scoreboard for an example. Right now, Caleb has the most wins, so he's going to choose his deck first. Then, since the rest of us are tied for 0, we're all going to simultaneously blind pick for our decks that we're going to play. So let's go ahead and take a look at which decks we picked, and take a look at our starting hands. With his first pick for this game, Caleb's going to choose to play Koma, Cosmos Serpent. This is a Simic value deck that looks to control the game by making lots of tokens from Koma's ability, alongside token doubling effects, and supplementing them with powerful Simic staples. He has to mulligan to 6, unfortunately, and keeps a starting hand with Hinterland Harbor, Botanical Sanctum, Command Tower, Tireless Tracker, Whelming Wave, and Scourge of Fleets. Unfortunately, I don't have the card that he mulliganed. Jelly's going to be playing his Lord Windgrace deck this time around. This is a swagged out lands deck running a landfall package and control cards to grind out opponents through utility to land value. Jelly's starting hand contains Verdant Catacombs, Forest, Barren Moor, Deathrite Shaman, Dark Confidant, Null Rod, and Splendid Reclamation. Derek is going to be playing Hogaak, Arisen Necropolis. This deck is all about making tokens and filling up the graveyard to cast Hogaak and use him either as a beater or to supplement his other graveyard synergies. Derek's starting hand is a Swamp, Command Tower, Stitcher Supplier, Satyr Wayfinder, Assassin's Trophy, Tend the Pests, and Chord of Calling. Last up is me, and I'm going to be running it back with Sarulf in this game. I'm hoping this time to be able to draw more interaction and proactive cards to help me grow Sarulf and take everybody out. I'll be keeping a greedy hand with Bajuka Bog, Shizo Death Storehouse, Lightning Greaves, Blackblade Reforged, Vampiric Tutor, Eternal Witness, and Garrick Wildspeaker. Jelly wins the pregame die roll this time, so he's going to be starting first. Jelly's going to lead off with a Forest and use it to cast a Deathrite Shaman. Derek plays a Command Tower and has his own turn 1 play with the Stitcher Supplier. He mills when it comes into play, and then he passes. On my turn, I choose to get my tap land out of the way by playing a Bajuka Bog and targeting Derek as the only person with stuff in his graveyard. Caleb is just going to play a Hinterland Harbor as his land for turn and then pass. Back over to Jelly, who's going to play a Verdant Catacombs and crack it to shotgun a Blood Crypt. He then goes to combat and swings his Deathrite Shaman at Caleb. Then he uses his mana to go ahead and cast a Dark Confidant. Derek plays a Swamp for turn and then passes. On my turn, I play a Shizo Death Storehouse. I then cast a Soul Ring and then use the Soul Ring to cast Lightning Greaves. Caleb's going to play a Botanical Sanctum as land for turn and then tap down to cast the Simic Signet. On Jelly's upkeep, he has a trigger from the Dark Confidant, which reveals an Assassin's Trophy. Jelly loses 2 life, and then he goes to draw. He'll play a Barren Moor as land for turn, and then go to combat, swinging at me. He then casts a Null Rod, and both Caleb and I are sad. At Jelly's end step, Derek's going to cast an Assassin's Trophy of his own, targeting Jelly's Deathrite Shaman to make sure he doesn't exile more cards from his graveyard. This will get Jelly a Mountain into play untapped. Derek's going to go to his turn now and shotgun an Overgrown Tomb. He's then going to tap out to cast a Satyr Wayfinder. He'll get a land with his trigger and then mill the rest. At Derek's end step, I'll go ahead and cast a Vampiric Tutor to get a card to the top of my library, losing 2 life. On my turn, I'm going to go ahead and play a Yavimaya as land for turn, and then I'm going to cast my commander, Sarulf. Caleb will untap, and then he's going to play a Yavimaya Coast as his land for turn, and then tap down to cast a Tireless Tracker. Back over to Jelly now, where he's going to get a Bob trigger during his upkeep, netting him an Exploration in exchange for a life. He's going to play a Nurturing Peatland as land for turn, then tap down to cast Lord Windgrace, losing a life from the Peatland because he forgot Yavimaya was out. He's then going to uptick Windgrace to discard a Dark Depths and draw 2 cards. Derek's just going to play another Swamp as land for turn and then pass to me. Unfortunately, I'm off to yet another slow start as I miss a land drop. I swing Sarulf at Jelly's face with no answer for the Null Rod, and then I play an Eternal Witness to get back my Vampiric Tutor. Caleb is also being stifled by the Null Rod, and so all he can do is play a Command Tower, which makes a currently useless clue from the Tireless Tracker, and then he's going to cast an Elemental Bond. We then move over to Jelly, who's going to get a Volrath Stronghold this time from Bob. He's going to play a Snow Forest as his land for turn, then tap to sacrifice his Nurturing Peatland and draw a card. This is going to trigger Sarulf, who's going to get a counter. Jelly's then going to cast Exploration and play a Wasteland as his second land for turn. He uses Windgrace's minus ability to return his Verdant Catacombs and his Nurturing Peatlands to the battlefield. On Jelly's end step, Derek's going to go ahead and cast a Chord of Calling, using it to get out a Corrosda Guildmage. He then goes to his turn and casts his commander, Hogaak. He's going to play a Bojuka Bog as land for turn, this time targeting Jelly. Unfortunately, Derek has nothing else, so he's going to pass after that. On my turn, I choose not to trigger Sarulf. I'm able to find the land, so I play a Misty Rainforest and crack it to shotgun an Overgrown Tomb. I then cast Garruk Wildspeaker and use his +1 ability to untap 2 of my lands, and then I pass. Caleb goes to his turn, where he unfortunately misses a land drop, but he's able to cast in the Rixmithies, which is going to come in with 5 counters. Jelly's going to get a Bob trigger during his upkeep, which gets him an Abrupt Decay and loses him 2 life. He's then going to play a Volrath Stronghold and shotgun a Stomping Ground before going to cast a Toxic Deluge for 8 life. It resolves, wiping the board. Jelly's then going to attempt to Wasteland my Yavimaya, to which I respond by casting a Heroic Intervention. Jelly's then going to crack his Verdant Catacombs and get a Badlands, then downtick Windgrace to get back his Verdant Catacombs and Wasteland. Jelly's swimming in lands right now, but the rest of us are definitely not. Derek's also going to miss a land drop here, but he'll go ahead and cast a Sengir Autocrat, which will make him 3 Surf tokens, and allow him to recast Hogaak from his graveyard. My lack of lands on my turn forces me to make some awkward plays, so I float some mana and uptick Garruk. Then I cast a Vampiric Tutor again. I put a card on top of my library, and cast Explorer to let me draw the card I just tutored for. I'll then go ahead and cast Life from the Loam, which lets me get Misty Rainforest back to my hand, and play it as land for turn. Moving over to Caleb, he's also going to miss a land drop, and so all he can do is just pass. At his end step, Jelly's going to go ahead and crack his Nurturing Peatland again to draw a card. Now on Jelly's actual turn, he's going to uptick Windgrace and then discard a Cabal Pit, drawing 2 cards. He's then going to cast a Finale of Devastation with X equals 7 to get Angry Omnath to the battlefield. He's then going to play an Urborg as land for turn, which will trigger Omnath and make an Elemental, then he'll pass. Seeing Jelly at a lower life total, I take this opportunity to remind Derek that Shizo can target anyone's creature. Keeping that in mind, Derek goes to combat, at which time I crack the Misty Rainforest to get a forest, and I tap it as a swamp to go ahead and activate Shizo and give Hogaak Fear. Jelly will also crack his Verdant Catacombs before damage, but cannot block and goes down to single digits. In Derek's second main phase, he's going to cast Attend the Pests, which sacrifices Hogaak and makes 8 pests. He's then going to go ahead and use those pests to recast Hogaak from the graveyard, and then pass. On my turn, I choose not to dredge Life from the Loam, but I end up missing a land drop. I opt to go ahead and use Garruk to generate enough mana to cast Sarulf again, and then I'll pass. We get to Caleb's turn, and he finally hits the land drop that he needed. He'll play it, and then use his mana to cast his commander, Koma. This will give him a trigger on the Elemental Bond and draw him a card. We're on to turn 8 now, and during Jelly's upkeep, Koma will trigger, giving Caleb a coil and drawing him a card. He's then going to use Koma's ability to go ahead and sacrifice that coil and tap down Windgrace, preventing him from being activated. This is going to give Sarulf a counter. Jelly's then going to head to combat and swing his 2 elementals at Derek and Omnath at Caleb. Caleb's going to block Omnath with Koma, and Derek's going to block one of the elementals with a pest, which gains him 1 life from the pest dying. Omnath is also going to die here, so Jelly's going to shoot Caleb with Omnath's death trigger. After damage, Jelly will continue to be a nuisance and cast a Damnation, which wipes the board. Derek's going to gain life from the rest of his pest dying, and then Jelly will pass. Now on to Derek, who's going to cast a Renin 7. He's going to use the +1 ability to get some lands into his hand, and then go ahead and play a Woodland Cemetery as land for turn. He'll be done after that. On my turn, I don't have much else to do besides try to recast Sarulf again and pass, hoping that all the board wipes are over. Caleb is also in the rebuilding phase here, so on his turn he's going to play a forest and then cast a Search for Tomorrow, getting an island. This is going to remove some counters from Arixmethes, but then he'll pass after that. However, at Caleb's end step, Jelly decides to cast his Abrupt Decay on Sarulf, killing him for the 3rd time. He'll then also activate his Volrath Stronghold to put Omnath back on top of his deck. It's now turn 9, and Jelly has kept this game in check so far, but he's still sitting at a pretty low life total, and his own board state hasn't really progressed. But he's going to look to change this by recasting Omnath, to which Caleb responds by casting Commit to put Omnath back in Jelly's deck. Jelly's then going to uptake Windgrace to discard and draw a card, then play a Field of the Dead. The Field of the Dead is online now, so he's going to go ahead and make a zombie token and then pass. We go now to Derek's turn, and he's going to activate the 0 effect on Renin 7 to put all the lands in his hand onto the battlefield. However, we made a mistake here with the new card and don't realize that the lands are supposed to come in tapped, so they will come in untapped, and Derek's going to use some of the mana to cast Death to return his Sengir Autocrat to the battlefield, losing 4 life. It will ETB and make Surf tokens, which Derek is then going to use to recast Hogaak, and then he'll pass. On my turn, tired of missing some land drops, I go ahead and choose to dredge the life from the loam and cast it, getting back a Misty Rainforest, Urborg, and Field of the Dead. I go ahead and play the Field of the Dead and choose to minus Garrick to make a Beast token. Back to Caleb, and he's going to go ahead and recast Koma. He'll draw a card from Elemental Bond, and then he'll pass, but at his end step, Jelly continues to be a nuisance and wastelands my Shizo. We now move to Jelly's turn, where on his upkeep, Caleb's going to make another coil, draw a card from the Elemental Bond, and then he's going to sack the coil to tap down Windgrace. Jelly's now just going to go ahead and recast Omnath, and then use the remainder of his mana to cast a Splendid Reclamation, getting back 4 lands. This will give him 4 zombies and 4 elementals. He's going to pass after that, but Derek at this time is going to go ahead and cast a Return of the Wild Speaker to draw 8 cards at his end step. With a fresh new set of cards, Derek goes to his turn, where Caleb's going to get his Koma triggers on upkeep, and then he's going to sack the new coil to tap down Renin 7. Derek's then going to play a Swamp as land for turn, and then play a Rishkar's Expertise. This draws him another 8 cards, and he plays a Greater Good as his free spell. Derek's then going to cast a Great Henge, and then use the Greater Good to sack Hogaak and draw 8 more cards, discarding 3. Derek is then going to cast Animate Dead, targeting Izoni, Thousand-Eyed, which is going to make 3 insects. Great Henge will trigger, giving Izoni a counter and drawing Derek a card. He's going to use the insects to convoke and recast Hogaak, triggering Great Henge again. He'll choose this time to replace the draw with the Dredge to get a Golgari Grave Troll back to his hand. But after all that drawing, Derek has no mana left, so he's going to go ahead and pass. Back to my turn, where after being beaten down by Jelly, I have very little left to do. So the only thing I can do is go ahead and play an Urborg as land for turn, and then I'll cast a Doubling Season. I'll then down to Garrick, making 2 Beast tokens, and after that I'll be done. On Caleb's turn, he remembers that he should have Koma tokens, so we'll give him the ones for the ones on my turn, and also he'll get the ones on his turn. He'll then play a Forest as land for turn, and then stare down the board. He considers his options, and then chooses to kill Jelly for his board wipes and his general insolence throughout the game.
Yeah, I think I'm just gonna try to kill him.
Okay, that's fair. I've done too much apparently.
I mean, if you're just gonna keep wiping the board every turn, this is gonna get annoying.
Not every time. I mean, not if you
Every
allow-
time you untap?
Not every time.
I've only done it twice.
Which is every time you've untapped?
If you allow me to use him, I won't have to do that.
I don't want you to use him.
Well then, look where he's at an impasse, sir.
Yeah, which seems I'm gonna have to kill you, sir.
All right, let's make it happen.
Caleb's going to go ahead and cast a Serpent of Yawning Depths, which is going to draw him a card and then remove the last counter from Arixmethes. His sea monster creatures now are basically unblockable, so he's going to swing Koma and one of the coils at Jelly. Jelly can't block, so he'll promptly die. At Caleb's end step, Derek's going to go ahead and tap the Great Henge to gain 2 life. With the menace of the table now dead, the game's opened up, but Caleb has now emerged as a threat too. He'll get his Koma triggers at Derek's upkeep, and then he's going to sack coils to tap down Renin 7 and Greater Good. Derek's going to go to draw, choosing to dredge his Golgari Grave Troll instead. He's then going to cast a Life's Legacy, sacking Hogaak to draw 9. He has a Nether Trader in his graveyard, so he'll choose to pay to return to the battlefield, triggering the Great Henge. Derek is then going to play a Forest as land for turn, triggering a Bloodghast in his graveyard. This is going to give him another Great Henge trigger, so he'll now tap the Great Henge, gaining 2 life, and he'll cast an Avenger of Zendikar, making 11 plants. He'll then go ahead and recast Hogaak, but with nothing else to do besides that, he passes. Now on my turn, Caleb's going to get his triggers at the beginning of my upkeep, and I'll play a Misty Rainforest as land for turn, and then crack it to get a Woodland Chasm. This is going to make me 4 total zombies, and using Garrick, I'll recast Sarulf again now that my Soul Ring is freed with the Null Rod gone. I'll then equip the Lightning Greaves to him, and then I'll pass. Now we'll go to Caleb's turn, where he's going to get his triggers again on upkeep, and then go straight to combat. Facing a massive threat in Derek, he'll go to combat and swing out his board at him. Derek cannot block anything, but before damage, Caleb's going to cast his own Return of the Wild Speaker, choosing to go ahead and give his creatures +3/+3. Derek is tapped out, but he'll start sacking his creatures to the greater good. Caleb's going to sack a Serpent to tap it down and make him do it now, and Derek's going to go ahead and sack the rest in response. However, unable to find an answer, he's going to get hit for 45 and then die. Because of all the creatures that Derek sacked, I got a bunch of counters on Sarulf. However, on Caleb's second main phase, he's going to go ahead and cast a Whelming Wave. This is sadly going to hit me asymmetrically, so my tokens all die, and Sarulf will get bounced while Caleb's board stays intact. It's going to be an uphill battle here, as Caleb's going to get triggers on my upkeep. He's going to sack his coils to tap down Garrick and my Lightning Greaves, and on my main phase, I'll cast Sarulf, then cast a Phyrexian Scriptures. Because of Doubling Season, I'm going to get both parts 1 and 2, so Sarulf is going to get 2 counters and become an artifact, and then all non-artifact creatures will be destroyed. Caleb's going to sack a coil to give Koma indestructible, to which I respond by casting a Go for the Throat. However, I forget that the Serpent of Yawning Depths is there, and Caleb sacks that to give Koma indestructible again on top of that. Sarulf's going to go ahead and get counters for all the things that did die, but Koma will remain, so trying desperately to claw back in, I play a Vesuva, copying my Field of the Dead, and then I get to make 4 zombies thanks to Doubling Season. On Caleb's turn, he's going to get his usual triggers and then play a Tide Channel Pathway as land for turn. Then he'll cast the Helm of the Host, equipping it to Koma. He's going to pass through combat, which is still going to make a copy of Koma, but this also means that he's going to get an additional coil at everybody's upkeep. Back on my turn, I have no choice but to go ahead and trigger Sarulf to exile both of our boards. Caleb's going to respond by tapping down Sarulf with a Serpent, which is going to leave Sarulf with some counters. I'll dredge life from the loam instead of drawing, and then I'll cast it to return Shizo and Misty Rainforest to my hand. I'll play the Misty as land for turn, and then crack it for a Forest, which is going to give me 4 zombies total. Desperate for some answers, I go ahead and play a Night's Whisper to draw 2 cards and lose 2 life. Now we'll go back to Caleb, where he's going to play a Lumbering Falls as land for turn, then cast a Soul Ring and his own Doubling Season. Thinking I have an opportunity here, I go ahead and flash in a Slippery Bog Bonder at Caleb's end step to give Sarulf Hexproof, but Caleb's going to respond by casting a Quandrix command, which bounces Sarulf back to my hand. Back over to me, and I'm going to try to cast Sarulf again, which is promptly going to be met by a counterspell from Caleb. I play a Shizo as land for turn to get some zombies, and I swing my existing board over at Caleb. With Sarulf being too expensive, I have nothing else to do but pass. We're going to move over to Caleb's turn, and he's going to cast a Hornet Queen, making 8 bugs because of Doubling Season, and he's going to cap it off by casting an Opposition. This now means that Caleb can tap down all of my lands, or my creatures, giving him enough time to slowly overwhelm me with value. The game's actually going to continue for a few more turns after this, but we'll go ahead and spare everyone having to watch me suffer for the next half hour. If you didn't get it yet, this means that Caleb is going to take Game 2 of the Grand Tournament. Jelly got off to a pretty dominant start this game. While everyone else is missing land drops, he was ramping and controlling the board, but he wasn't really developing his own board enough until it was too late. He ended up losing nearly half his own life total to his own effects, and after annoying the rest of the table enough, it only took a couple of swings for him to go down. This just goes to show that the political side of Commander can be just as important as the actual gameplay. Even if your board state isn't that threatening, you can still draw a lot of unnecessary attention based on how you choose to play and the way you interact with the rest of the table. Derek seemed like he should have been a bigger threat that game, but he was also significantly crippled by Jelly's board wipes. He ended up having to exile a lot of his own win conditions from his graveyard to recast Hogaak to rebuild. Derek drew a ton of cards later in the game, but unfortunately because of early mana troubles, he ended up mostly just spinning his wheels. Ultimately, he ended up just a turn short of being able to turn the corner. For the second game in a row, I was also similarly unable to make an impact, as I missed key land drops and expended too many resources early to try to keep up. It also didn't help that Jelly was committed to disrupting my board, as his Null Rod, Wastelands, Abrupt Decay, and board wipes sent me back too far to possibly recover. The table was primarily focused on taking Jelly out, and Jelly was focused on taking me out, which meant that Caleb was able to wait his turn to take over the game. This game really showcased the strength of Koma, who is difficult to remove and can easily snowball out of control if allowed to go unchecked. Unfortunately, with both Derek and I crippled, and Jelly's attention focused elsewhere, we were unable to find a timely answer to Koma. Let's go ahead and take a look at the scoreboard now. Both Koma and Naeth are out for Caleb, leaving him with just Ilharg and Golos. The early lead is nice for Caleb, but that also means that the rest of the table now has their sights set on taking him down. That's going to be it for Game 2, so thanks again for watching everybody, and stay tuned for the next episode.